of thing. So whenever we talk about the change in the education system, I want to believe that we must not only talk about it, we have to see what can happen now that we have a University of Trinidad and Tobago. What does this indigenization of education really mean, and how can we carry that forward? My other point, and my final point, has to deal with Suniti's idea of the PNM not responding to the Afro-Trinidad people, but as an Afro-Saxon party. And I think probably there's something for further discussion and analysis there, because I'm thinking that all the things I have read about the formation of the PNM and so, I did not get the sense it was being aimed at a particular ethnic group in the country, but rather Eric Williams, in his lofty intellectualism, was seeing what he called the mother Trinidad and Tobago, and he was not really gearing to cause any one ethnic group to be more elevated than the next. However, what I believe I have witnessed is this sense that somehow the PNM morphed into representing a particular ethnic group. So I really feel that these discussions are important, but I also want to see where these discussions could really come up with some tangible statements to take the discussion forward. So I thank you for the opportunity to just share my views here.
Thank you. Right. Yes, it's you. Yes.
Thank you very much, Ozzy Warwick. Some of the speakers before touched on a number of points I had, so I'm actually down to 1 point, so I should be pretty short. I think that, Sunita, you raised a very important point that, that I don't want to get lost, which is, you said that actually what we have, inherently we have a coalition culture. And I find that that's an interesting point, and I would have hoped at some point we could elaborate a little bit more on that. I don't think it's too an important point to be lost. And I want to come back and show a little bit how or why that is important. When you talked about the critical question for the Caribbean and for Trinidad is representation, and I wonder if we should even go a step further and really ask or state that the critical question is about participation. In other words, even with representation, we still fall into a sort of representative democracy. And maybe one of the reasons we are grappling with the representation aspect is because maybe because of that coalition culture. And that what we really should be heading towards is more participatory democracy in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, that speaks to the topic of today. Can coalition succeed in Trinidad and Tobago? Maybe not in the context of representative democracy. Maybe what we need to go and really work towards and have a discussion around is how do we establish a participatory democracy in Trinidad and Tobago? And maybe in that discussion, but also in terms of practice, we'll be able to work out some of the, move forward as a people and as a civilization. Thank you.
Yeah. David went outside. He lost his turn. Yes, go ahead, brother. Yes. And could we agree that Suniti would respond after? Yeah. Yeah.
I think it would be very unfair if I did not make my contribution here. Head table, ladies and gentlemen.
Could you tell us who you are, please?
I don't want to disclose my name, which is my pattern not to do so because of for security reasons.
I don't understand, but go ahead.
Fine. Thank you. Thanks. But however, as I came in, I heard Suniti Maharaj talking about how do we get government to give representation to the people in need. Also, we're talking about constitutional reform. I'm not sure whether we need to have the reform of the constitution or a total renewed design of constitution. And do we need really reform or a form of constitution? Since independence, we have been living in captivity. And as the gentleman here pointed out, the press, in my observation, happens to be designed to save the face of all government and suppress the voices of the people. hence the reason why we are where we are today. Constitution should be not rigid, it should be flexible. And whilst there's so many talk about constitution, who is the person to really come up with the constitution, as the gentleman who was making his contribution just now? A constitution is a convention to which is convened in the various constituencies to be slated by members of its electorate. It's a prescription in the form in which the people would like to be governed, so it can be handed to those to take to legislation by public participation. Let the people into a conference to have a say, as the gentleman repeated. This is the form in which they would be able to have a say. And then they will become a real partner with government to participate in the democracy process. As the person in the back here talked about the unpreparedness of public officers, well, we have seen that all governments in the past in Trinidad has really never reached to work for the people. Needless, we try to pretend that that has been so. My proof to that of the pudding, it is where we are in crime today. It did not happen yesterday. It was an accumulative process that has taken place. Very, very serious crime situation in this country has not even reached to the media or to those in authority. I happen to be putting my hands directly on it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. All right. Yes, it's your turn.
Thank you, David Emery, CRF. I've been a member of CRF for quite a long time, and I think this is probably the first time that I'm speaking in a public forum organized by the CRF, which is strange. Within our private meetings, I am very much a part of it, but, you know. The question of coalitions in Trinidad and Tobago. I remember as a young guy, a little boy, going to hear Dr. Williams in the library and the square and so on. And from since then, it has all, you know, we thought of it as a Afro-Trinidad-oriented party. I know there were a lot of teachers and so on. As I grew up, I realized that there were two constituencies that were critical part of what was essentially a coalition. And Suniti mentioned them, the Muslims and the Presbyterians. Of course, that was the capsized by Mr. Manning when he came into power, and he threw out the old PNM, as it were. To their detriment, I might say. The question of coalitions, well, we have had the Alliance and the most famous one, NER. But to my mind, the question of coalition has not really solved our problems as yet. Because the coalition that we have at present, we have the UNC, we have the COP, two major partners. To the mind of quite a number of people in Trinidad, is one and the same. One is a knife and fork representation of the Indo-Trinidad or the intellectual, you know, side of it, and some of the Afro-Saxon people, right? Including myself. Although I don't consider myself Afro-Saxon, but, you know, there were quite a number of us coming out from NJAC and so on who wouldn't vote for PNM, although I have a couple times, who wouldn't really tolerate that kind of corruption that we have known probably in public service, etc. Right? So the question of a coalition that will represent the interests of the people of Trinidad as a whole. The labor movement has always been there trying to get the voice of the workers involved in the government process. But to my mind, it has not happened because of the same ethnic considerations. One might say people vote on the ethnic preferences. What I would like to see in terms of a coalition in Trinidad, and I have mentioned it here and there, is really an alliance of the regions, you know. Because if you look at the constituencies or the regions in Trinidad, for example, I live in Trinity. There's a large East Indian community. There's a large Afro community. Many of the Afro people vote PNM. Majority of the Indo people vote UNC. But we live in the same community. We share the same problems. Right? If we could get organized in terms of our region, our areas, I think we have a better chance of a coalition of the people, an alliance of people. Not necessarily of parties, you know, it could come to that. And that has been the problem in Trinidad, because even in terms of what has been happening since Chambers' demise, like people in North Trinidad feel like the whole question of leadership has been removed from them. It's people from Tobago, people from South and Central have been running this country since then. And in terms of the people in the rural areas, they always have the thought that we have been neglected. So the bottom line I am suggesting is that what we really need is an alliance and a coalition based on regions, you know, because that is what is going to solve our problems, the problems of our roads, etc., etc. And that is what is going to be able to eliminate the ethnic or religious, well, the ethnicity in voting. Because as Suniti said, in her community, you could have seen where the Muslim people voted for the PNM because of whatever considerations. The bottom line I'm saying is that Trinidad and Tobago, we need to come up with race and religion and vote and organize ourselves, our regions, and come together on regional alliances of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we should ask, or somebody, sorry, I didn't see. Go ahead.
I didn't think I'd make a comment at this meeting. I've never been here before, and I don't know what the meeting is all about. But in fact, references have been made to politics and parties and constitutions. My view is that I don't think any document that's called a constitution would resolve our issues. I have come through a long line of political experiences. I'm from central Trinidad. I am Hindu. I'm Indo-Trinidadian, of course. And I don't think I'm less patriotic than any other Trinidadian. The point I want to make is that we feel whether we have a UNC government in power or a PNM government in power, we in South Central are still deprived of the basic needs of society. All you have to do is to walk about the villages and towns of central Trinidad, and you would see what I mean. PNM killed the oil industry, and by this I mean, when they nationalized the oil industry in 73, 74, they stopped drilling for oil. They emptied the wells they got when they nationalized. Now it is very expensive to look for more oil, and they can't get people to look for more drilling. It's very expensive. We don't know what they're going to do. And the UNC and the PNM killed the sugar culture. It was not only sugar cane we produced in the sugar fields. It was a culture. It was an industry. It was agro-industry. My parents planted all sorts of foodstuffs in the sugar lands when the canes were growing up. So what Pandey and the PNM did was to kill that culture. And so you let loose a lot of people tangentially in society, walking about, hoping to make money from selling drugs and singing chutney. We have proceeded, the South Central community has embarked upon a sort of a culture of chutney. I call it demoralization and degeneration. It's likened to what I used to be told Calypso was in my young days. Vulgar and obscene. That's what chutney has become. We have lost our culture, and every effort is made by the powers that be to suppress our culture and our philosophy. My culture is not roti and curry.